Hello and welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be looking at the 2026 United States governor elections. In 2026, 36 states will be electing their governor, of which 34 will be elected to 4-year terms, and two of these states will be electing their governors to 2-year terms. So let's get started. In the state of California, I believe California will be safe for the Democrats. There was some talk that Kamala Harris may run for governor to reignite her political career following her loss to Donald Trump in last year's presidential election. However, Kamala Harris has came out and said that she will not be running for governor. So there is a very crowded Democratic primary field, and it'll be interesting to see who the Democrats nominate in California, but California should be safe for the Democrats. Now, in the state of Colorado, this is another safe Democratic state. Incumbent Democratic Senator Michael Bennet will be running for governor in Colorado, and if he wins, he will be able to appoint his replacement to the U.S. Senate, and Michael Bennet should easily hold this seat for the Democrats in the state of Colorado. Now, in the state of Illinois, J.B. Pritzker is going to run for a third term, and he should win fairly easily. Another state in the safely Democratic column. And if my voice does sound a little weird today, it is because I am sick, but I still wanted to get this video out. So I appreciate you guys understanding that. Now, in the state of Rhode Island, Dan McKee is the incumbent Democratic governor. He is actually fairly unpopular. However, Rhode Island at its baseline is a very Democratic state, and there's a good chance that he's not even going to be the Democratic nominee. But regardless, I do think ultimately Rhode Island is going to be safely Democratic. And I do think that in Hawaii, this is going to be a safe race for Governor Josh Green. And in Connecticut, incumbent Ned Lamont, he is facing a primary challenge. I do think he'll win that challenge pretty easily. But even if he doesn't, Connecticut should be safely Democratic. Now, in the state of Oklahoma, this is going to be safe for Republicans. In a wave year, I could see this race narrowing up in 2022. The incumbent Republican governor, he only won by 14 points in a red-leaning year. And on the governor level, Oklahoma has seen some more competitive races. But as of right now, I think this race should be safely Republican. The state of South Carolina, I think right now is safe for Republicans. This could become a more competitive race. Back in 2018, in a blue wave year, Republicans only won here by 8 percentage points. So I could see this race narrowing up and becoming likely Republican, but for now, safe Republican. Now, in the state of Alaska, incumbent Republican Lieutenant Governor Nancy Dahlstrom is running, and the likely Democratic candidate is former Democratic Congresswoman Mary Peltola. Now, Peltola has yet to announce her campaign for governor, so we don't know yet for sure if Mary Peltola will run for governor. If she does, I think this race becomes lean Republican, but considering that she has yet to announce, for now I will put Alaska as likely Republican. Now, Idaho, Wyoming, and South Dakota, there's really not much to say, as well as Nebraska. These races should all be safe Republican. And going on over to the South, Arkansas, Tennessee, and Alabama should also as well be safe for the Republicans. Now, in the state of Vermont, this is a safe Republican race, which is pretty interesting because in 2024, on the presidential level, Vermont was one of the most Democratic states. They voted for Kamala Harris by a huge margin, but they also, in 2024, reelected their Republican governor, Phil Scott, by a huge margin. I expect he'll win pretty easily in 2026. In Maryland, Wes Moore should win re-election pretty easily by a safe margin. Former Republican Governor Larry Hogan, who was elected in 2014 and 2018, is constitutionally eligible to run for a third term now, since it would be non-consecutive. So if he does run, this race could be more interesting considering he was a fairly popular governor, but he has not yet announced a campaign. So for now, Maryland should be safely Democratic. Now, going on over to the state of New Mexico, former Democratic Congresswoman Deb Haaland is running for governor in New Mexico. She served as Secretary of the Interior under Joe Biden, and I think she would win this race by a likely margin as of right now. In Minnesota, Governor Tim Walz is likely to run for a third term, and I think he would win fairly comfortably. In New York, this is a pretty interesting state because in the last several years, New York has seen a big shift towards Republicans. From 2020 to 2024, New York swung about 10 or 11 points on the presidential level towards Republicans. And back in 2022, Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul won by less than 7 percentage points. But keep in mind that was a more Republican-leaning year. 2026 should be a more Democratic-leaning year, and I do think that Elise Stefanik will be a weaker Republican candidate compared to Lee Zeldin. I think Kathy Hochul, as of right now, this race with Kathy Hochul versus Elise Stefanik in New York is likely Democratic, but as we get closer to the midterms, I could see this race becoming safely Democratic. And now moving on to the state of Oregon. Oregon was actually very close in 2022. There was an independent candidate, however, so the Democrats only won in Oregon by around 3 percentage points or so. I do think Tina Kotek, the Democratic governor, improves upon that margin in a bluer year. I think Oregon is going to be likely Democratic in 2026. Now, in the state of Pennsylvania back in 2022, Attorney General Josh Shapiro won the governorship over State Senator Doug Mastriano, and Shapiro won by 15 percentage points. That's in a state where Joe Biden won by just 1 percentage point just 2 years beforehand. So Josh Shapiro is a very strong candidate, and we have that data point not just from the 2022 governor race, but also back in 2016, Josh Shapiro was elected Attorney General on the same ballot that Trump won Pennsylvania. And in 2020, Shapiro was reelected as Attorney General of Pennsylvania by several percentage points more than Joe Biden won Pennsylvania by on the same ballot. I think Josh Shapiro is a very strong candidate in Pennsylvania. As of right now, Pennsylvania is likely Democratic. However, if Doug Mastriano is the Republican nominee once again, and it seems like he will run for governor once again, and he has led Republican primary polls, then I do think that Josh Shapiro could win very easily by potentially 20 points or more. But until then, I think for now, Pennsylvania is likely Democratic. In the state of Florida, Florida has seen huge shifts towards Republicans. Trump won Florida by 13 points in 2022. Ron DeSantis won re-election as governor by around 19 percentage points. Now, in the Republican primary, we have Congressman Byron Donalds running for governor, and there has been talk about Casey DeSantis, the First Lady of Florida, running for governor. We don't know yet if she will. But regardless, I think Republicans should win Florida fairly easily by a likely margin. Sorry about that. And in the state of Florida, on the Democratic side, you've got former Congressman David Jolly. He used to be a Republican. He's now running as a Democrat for governor. Again, though, I do think that Florida is too far gone for Democrats. I think, although this will be somewhat of a competitive race, I do think that Republicans should win Florida fairly easily. Now, looking ahead to the state of Texas, Republican Governor Greg Abbott is running for a 4th term. Now, I do think that Greg Abbott should win fairly easily. However, I do think it will be by a single-digit margin. Remember back in 2022, Abbott won by 11 points, and that was in a red-leaning year. 2026 should be a bluer national environment. I think Abbott probably wins by around maybe 8 points or so. Now, looking ahead to the state of Wisconsin, I think Wisconsin is going to be a very interesting race. And Wisconsin is a state that in 2018, Tony Evers, he beat the incumbent Republican governor, Scott Walker, by a very narrow margin. And then in 2022, Tony Evers won re-election. He has now declined to run for a third term in 2026. Now, the Democratic primary is interesting. You've got Attorney General Josh Kaul and you've got Lieutenant Governor Sarah Rodriguez as likely candidates. Regardless of who gets the Democratic Party's nomination, though, I do think the Democrats are going to be slight favorites in the state of Wisconsin by a lean margin. I don't think the Republicans, they really don't seem to have a super strong candidate right now. I will say, though, former Governor Scott Walker has hinted that he may run for governor once again. I don't know if he will, but I think as of right now, Wisconsin is lean Democratic, and Massachusetts should be safe for the Democratic Party. I did forget to fill that out. But now looking ahead to the state of Maine, Maine should be likely for the Democrats. You've got a very crowded Democratic primary field, but regardless of who gets the nomination, Democrats should hold Maine fairly easily. Now, in the state of Michigan, you've got a very interesting race here because on the Democratic primary, you've got Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson running against Lieutenant Governor Garland Gilchrist. I think Jocelyn Benson will be the likely Democratic nominee. And for the Republicans, you've got Congressman John James running for governor. Now, if this was a head-to-head race between Benson and James, I do think that Benson wins by a fairly comfortable margin, probably 7 or 8 points. But you've got a pretty interesting dynamic in Michigan because the mayor of Detroit, Mike Duggan, he is running as an independent. I think he knew that he would not win a Democratic primary, so he's running as an independent, and he's actually polling at pretty high margins. So he is taking votes away from both Democrats and Republicans, but he seems to be taking away more votes from Democrats than Republicans. So due to the entrance of Mike Duggan into this race, I think Michigan is going to be a very close race. And as of right now, I'm going to put it into the tilt Democratic column. I think Democrats maintain a very narrow edge here over Republicans, but I think that Michigan will be a very interesting race to watch. Now in Kansas, now if you look back to 2014, Sam Brownback, the Republican, won here by less than 4 percentage points, but he was a very unpopular governor. So in 2018, Laura Kelly won here by a narrow margin in 2018 against Chris Kobach, and then in 2022 she was reelected by around 2 points or so. And on the same ballot there was an abortion referendum, a pro-choice referendum that passed in Kansas. So I think that went a long way towards helping Laura Kelly win re-election. Now in 2026, we don't know yet who the Democrats or the Republicans will nominate, but holding Kansas's governorship is going to be a very tough lift for the Democrats. And honestly, right now, I'm going to put Kansas at lean Republican. I do think Republicans are a definite favorite to flip Kansas's governor's mansion. However, I don't think they're going to win by as much as you might expect. Now, in the state of Arizona, I think that the incumbent Democratic governor, Katie Hobbs, I think she is the favorite. In the Republican primary, you've got Congressman Andy Biggs running against Karen Taylor Robeson. I think Andy Biggs would not be a good candidate for the Republicans. In Arizona, we've seen that extreme right-wing candidates have not fared well, such as Carrie Lake and Blake Masters. I think Andy Biggs would be a continuation of that, and I do think he'd likely win the Republican primary. Now, if the Republicans nominate Karen Taylor Robson, I think their chances certainly improve, but as of right now, I think that Arizona is going to be tilt for the Democrats. And you could point to 2024 where Trump did win Arizona by 5.5 percentage points, but on the same ballot, they elected a Democratic Senator Ruben Gallego by nearly 3 percentage points. So down ballot, Arizona is still a a somewhat blue state, or a very blue tilting state. Now looking ahead to Nevada, in 2022, Joe Lombardo was elected as governor as a Republican, defeating the incumbent Democrat Steve Sisolak. And Lombardo has enjoyed very high approval ratings, and he is running against the Democratic Attorney General, Aaron Ford. I think Aaron Ford is the strongest possible candidate the Democrats could nominate here against Joe Lombardo. But again, Lombardo has that incumbency advantage. He's got high approval ratings. Now, something to keep in mind, though, is that Las Vegas's economy has not been doing well this past year under the Trump administration. And if it continues to get worse, there could be a backlash here in Nevada against Republicans that could cost Joe Lombardo re-election. But as of right now, I think Nevada is going to be a lean Republican state. Now, in the state of New Hampshire, Kelly Ayotte was elected as governor in 2024 by nearly 10 percentage points. Even though 2026 will be a bluer environment, I think she is a favorite to win re-election by a likely margin. I'd be pretty surprised if the Democrats flipped New Hampshire's governor's mansion. Now, in Iowa, State Auditor Rob Sand, a Democrat, is running for the governor's mansion. He is the only statewide elected Democrat in the state of Iowa, and I think he's the strongest possible Democratic candidate. And Kim Reynolds, she is actually not very popular in Iowa. She's the incumbent Republican governor, but she is retiring, and so I think in a bluer environment, Iowa could be a very interesting race. For now, I'm going to put it at lean Republican. I do think that in a really good night for Democrats, they could potentially flip Iowa, but it's going to take a big push and a lot to go right for Democrats. Now, in the state of Ohio, we have some news, because on the Republican side, Vivek Ramaswamy is the likely Republican nominee, but on the Democratic side, there was some talk that Sherrod Brown, the former Democratic senator, might run for governor, but it seems more likely that he's going to run for the U.S. Senate again. I do think Sherrod Brown would have been the strongest Democratic candidate for the governor's race, but if he's going to run for U.S. Senate again, the Democrats do still have a few options. Right now, the biggest Democratic candidate who's declared for this race is Amy Acton. I don't think she'd be a very strong candidate, but if former Congressman Tim Ryan runs for governor, I think he could have a very real shot at flipping Ohio's governorship. But for now, I'm going to put Ohio's governor's race at lean Republican. If Tim Ryan runs for governor, I think Democrats could have a very good shot at flipping this race. Now, that just leaves the state of Georgia, where in 2018, Brian Kemp was elected governor as a Republican by just 2 percentage points, and he is term limited now in 2026. Now, Kemp did decline to run for Senate, interestingly enough, but that's a different topic. Now, on the Republican side, you do have two candidates. The Attorney General of Georgia, Chris Carr, he is running, and the Lieutenant Governor, Burt Jones, he is also running for the Republican nomination. And the Democratic primary is interesting because Lucy McBath may or may not run. She is a Democratic congresswoman from the Atlanta area. And then you've got former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, who is running for governor. And former Republican Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan, he actually very recently switched parties to the Democrats, and there's a good chance that he could run for governor as a Democrat. Now, keep in mind, in Georgia in 2026, they do have a U.S. Senate race with Jon Ossoff, who's running for re-election. I think Ossoff is going to win re-election fairly comfortably, and I do think that could help whichever Democrat is nominated for the governor's race in terms of coattails. So I do think that the Democrats have a very narrow advantage in Georgia. And even though Georgia swung towards Republicans in 2024, relative to the national popular vote, Georgia has consistently still been trending towards Democrats for over a decade now. Georgia is still getting bluer, and I do think that with a bluer national environment, you've got a perfect storm. I think Georgia, the Democrats do have an advantage at the moment, although I do think Georgia is going to be a very competitive race. So there you have it. In 2026, I think Democrats will win 18 governor races, and I think Republicans will win 18 governor races as well as of early August 2025. I have the Democrats flipping the governorship of Georgia, and I have Republicans flipping the governorship of Kansas. I think we could see very competitive races in Nevada, Arizona, potentially Alaska, Iowa, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Michigan. So if you all did enjoy, please be sure to drop a like and subscribe. Turn on post notifications so that you don't miss a future upload. Please feel free to comment video suggestions and your thoughts, and I will see you all in the next video.